physics has a problem. Gravity, the force holding you to the ground right now, is 100 million billion times weaker than the other forces of nature. Not slightly weaker, not twice as weak. 100 million billion times weaker. No theory in physics can explain this. Not the Standard Model, not general relativity, not any equation currently in use. The only solutions that work mathematically all require the same thing. Reality has more dimensions than we can see. This is not speculation. This is the conclusion of the most rigorous theoretical physics of the last century. String theory, the leading candidate for a theory of everything, requires 10 dimensions to be mathematically consistent. The Randall-Sundrum model, proposed by physicists Lisa Randall and Raman-Sundrum in a paper published in Physical Review Letters in 1999, describes our universe as a 4-dimensional membrane floating in a 5-dimensional space. Gravity leaks. While all other forces remain locked to our 3 dimensions, gravity bleeds into the larger space. That is why it arrives at us so diluted, so incomprehensibly weak. 6 ancient traditions described this geometry before the mathematics existed. Not by accident, not by guessing, through direct investigation of the nature of reality itself, this video maps the mathematical structure of extra dimensions against 6 ancient traditions that independently describe them with extraordinary precision. The Vedic tradition, the Hermetic tradition, the Sufi tradition, the Taoist tradition, the Buddhist tradition, the Egyptian tradition. Not as metaphor, not as spirituality dressed up as physics. As 2 independent investigations of the same multidimensional reality, separated by thousands of years and thousands of miles, arriving at the same structural conclusion. What we see is embedded in something larger. The observable universe is a surface, and the ancient traditions described what lies beneath. The hierarchy problem is one of the deepest unsolved questions in all of physics. The 4 fundamental forces, gravity, electromagnetism, the strong nuclear force, and the weak nuclear force, should, in principle, unify at very high energies. But gravity is so incomprehensibly weaker than the others that making them unify requires a degree of mathematical fine-tuning, so extreme it stretches the credibility of any theory. Physicists call this the hierarchy problem. Why is there such an enormous gap between the scale at which gravity operates and the scale at which everything else operates? The most elegant solution, the one that requires no fine-tuning, is that gravity is not actually weak. It only appears weak in 3 dimensions, because most of it is escaping into dimensions we cannot perceive. The idea that extra dimensions might explain the hierarchy of forces is not new to physics. In 1919, 4 years after Einstein published general relativity, a German mathematician named Theodor Kaluza proposed that a 5th dimension might unify gravity and electromagnetism. Kaluza sent his paper to Einstein. Einstein sat on it for 2 years because he could not find a flaw. In 1926, Swedish physicist Oscar Klein proposed that the extra dimension was real but compactified, curled into a space so small it was invisible at every scale we could measure. This was not rejected. It was incorporated into the foundations of what became string theory. 80 years later, Randall and Sundrum gave this framework its most precise mathematical form. The Randall-Sundrum model describes the universe as 2 4-dimensional brains, membranes of reality, separated by a 5-dimensional curved space called the bulk. Our universe is one brain. The other brain, the Planck brain, is where gravity is strong. Between them, the bulk, the 5-dimensional space that contains both brains. Gravity travels through the bulk. By the time it reaches our brain, our observable universe, it has spread across the extra dimension and arrived diluted. This is why gravity is weak. Not because it is intrinsically weak, but because most of it exists in a dimension we cannot directly perceive. The mathematics works. The hierarchy problem dissolves. The only question remaining: is this what is actually happening? CERN's Large Hadron Collider is the most powerful particle accelerator ever built. One of its primary research programs is searching for evidence of extra dimensions, specifically through Kaluza-Klein graviton signatures, massive graviton excitations that would only exist if the extra dimension of the Randall-Sundrum model is real. In April 2026, LHCb and CMS, two independent CERN experiments, published data showing a 4 sigma anomaly in particle decay rates that cannot be fully explained by current standard model physics. A 4 sigma result means there is a 1 in 16,000 chance. This is a random fluctuation. Scientists are cautious. 5 sigma is the gold standard. But the data is pointing at something the current framework cannot account for. And the theoretical frameworks best positioned to explain it all require the same structural addition to reality. More dimensions than 3. Here is what makes this extraordinary. 6 ancient traditions independently, across different civilizations, across different millennia, described a reality structured in precisely the same way. The Randall-Sundrum model describes it. A visible surface, an underlying field, dimensions of reality beyond the 3 observable, forces and fields permeating levels of existence that ordinary perception cannot detect. They did not have particle accelerators. They did not have differential geometry. They did not have the mathematics of warped extra-dimensional space-time. They had direct investigation, and they arrived at the same conclusion. The Vedic tradition describes reality through 5 elements, the Pancha Mahabhuta, not in the Western sense of earth, water, fire, and air, but as 5 levels of manifestation from the subtlest to the densest. At the most fundamental level, Akasha, the field substrate from which all other levels emerge. From Akasha arises Vayu movement, vibration, the first dynamic. From Vayu arises Tejas, radiant energy. From Tejas arises Apas, cohesion. From Apas arises Prithvi, solidity, matter as we observe it. This is a precise hierarchy of levels, from the most fundamental field down to the dense 3-dimensional world we observe. The Vedic tradition did not say reality is 3-dimensional. It said 3-dimensional reality is the densest level of a multi-level structure whose most fundamental layer is a field that permeates all levels simultaneously. This is the Randall-Sundrum bulk, described in the Chandogya Upanishad, the Hermetic tradition from the ancient Egyptian schools preserved in texts dating to the early centuries CE, describes reality as existing on multiple planes simultaneously. The principle of correspondence: as above, so below; as below, so above; as within, so without. Not a metaphor for personal transformation, a statement about the structure of reality. The Hermetic tradition describes the physical plane, the 3-dimensional world of matter, as one level of a structure that includes subtler planes, the mental plane, the spiritual plane, each operating by its own laws, each embedded in the more fundamental level above it. The physical plane is our brain. The subtler planes are the bulk. The principle of correspondence is the mathematical relationship between what happens on each level. In the 13th century CE, the Sufi mystic Ibn Arabi described what he called Wadat al-wujud, the unity of being. In his Fusus al-Hikam, written in 1229 CE, Ibn Arabi describes reality as existing across multiple hadarat, levels or presences of being. The physical world we observe is one hadra, one level of presence. It is embedded in more fundamental levels of reality that are always present but not directly visible, from within the most dense level. Ibn Arabi describes the relationship between levels using the metaphor of light passing through different densities, the same light expressing at different levels of intensity and different degrees of visibility. Gravity in the Randall-Sundrum model passes through levels of the bulk, expressing with different intensities on different branes. Ibn Arabi wrote this 7 centuries before Randall and Sundrum derived it from Einstein's field equations. The Taoist tradition describes existence across 3 fundamental realms, Sankai, the 3 powers, heaven, earth, and the human realm that mediates between them. But beneath this visible structure, the Tao itself is described as prior to all realms, permeating all levels simultaneously, invisible at the level of ordinary 3-dimensional perception. Tao Te Ching, Chapter 4. The Tao is like an empty vessel, yet it may be used without ever being exhausted. It is the unfathomable source of 10,000 things. Unfathomable source, not visible from within the 3-dimensional surface, present at every level simultaneously. This is the bulk, the higher dimensional space from which our observable brain derives its properties, present everywhere, permeating everything, directly accessible only through what it produces. The Buddhist cosmological tradition describes existence across multiple lokas, worlds, or realms, each governed by different laws and different degrees of density. The physical world we observe, the Kamaloka, is the densest level. Above it, or more precisely, underlying it, are levels of existence with different properties, different degrees of manifestation, different relationships to time and space. What the Buddhist tradition describes is not a literal geography of heavens. It is a structural description of reality as multi-level, with the observable 3-dimensional world as one level, embedded within a larger structure. The same structure Randall and Sundrum derived from mathematics, the same structure CERN is now searching for evidence of. In particle collision data, the Egyptian tradition describes reality across multiple planes: the physical world, the duat, the hidden realm, and the realm of the Neteru, the forces underlying physical reality. The pyramid texts, the oldest religious texts ever discovered, inscribed on the walls of pyramids around 2400 BCE, describe the duat not as a distant afterlife location, but as the underlying level of reality that is always present beneath the physical surface. The forces that govern physical reality, the Neteru, operate from this underlying level. They are not visible within 3-dimensional observation, but their effects are entirely observable in the physical world. Gravity, in the Randall-Sundrum model, operates from the bulk, the underlying level of reality. Its effects are entirely observable in our 3-dimensional brain. Its source is not visible within our dimensions. The pyramid texts describe this. In 2400 BCE, let us see the complete picture. The observable surface, Randall-Sundrum, our 4-dimensional brain, Vedic, Prithvi, the dense material level, Hermetic, the physical plane, Sufi, the first Hadra, the visible world, Taoist, Earth, the realm of ordinary perception, Buddhist, Kamaloka, the world of form, Egyptian, the physical world, 6 descriptions of the same surface. The underlying field, Randall-Sundrum, the 5-dimensional bulk, Vedic, Akasha, the field substrate, beneath all levels, Hermetic, the higher planes, mental and spiritual, Sufi, the deeper Hadarat, the levels beyond ordinary perception, Taoist, the Tao prior to all realms, permeating all levels, Buddhist, the subtler lokas beyond the world of form, Egyptian, the duat, and the realm of the Neteru, 6 descriptions of the same bulk. Why forces appear weak at the surface. Randall-Sundrum. Gravity leaks into the bulk, arrives diluted. Vedic. The subtlest forces operate at the level of akasha, not visible as dense phenomena. Hermetic. Forces on the physical plane are expressions of subtler forces operating from higher planes. Sufi. What appears in the visible world is a reduced expression of what operates at deeper levels. Taoist. What the Tao produces in the observable world is a partial expression of its full nature. Egyptian. The Neteru operate from the Duat, only their effects appear in the physical plane. 6 descriptions of the same mechanism. 3 rows. Every cell matched. 6 traditions. 1 geometry. The ancient traditions did not describe extra dimensions as a mathematical abstraction. They described them as directly accessible through specific practices, specific states of consciousness, specific methods of investigation that went beyond 3-dimensional perception. This is the claim that physics cannot yet evaluate. Whether the extra dimensions of the Randall-Sundrum model are accessible through the contemplative practices, the Vedic, Hermetic, Sufi, Taoist, Buddhist, and Egyptian traditions prescribed. This is not a question the LHC can currently answer. But the structural correspondence is extraordinary. 6 traditions, 6 independent descriptions of a multi-level reality, 1 mathematical framework derived 1999. The ancient traditions were not guessing. They were reporting from a different kind of investigation. Right now, the space you are sitting in is not empty. The Randall-Sundrum model says, the space around you is a brain surface, embedded in a higher dimensional bulk, through which gravity is constantly leaking. The Chandogya Upanishad says, the space within the heart is as vast as the space outside. Both the heaven and the earth are contained within it. Both are pointing at the same recognition. The space you perceive in 3 dimensions is a surface of something larger. The ancient traditions prescribed a specific practice for recognizing this directly, not through mathematics, not through particle acceleration, but through the direct investigation of the awareness that is always already present, at the center of your experience. Sit comfortably, eyes closed if possible. Bring attention to the space within the chest, not the heartbeat, not the breath, the space itself. The Upanishad says, this inner space is as vast as the outer space. Let that be not a concept, but a direct noticing. Now gently allow the boundary between inner space and outer space to become permeable. The space within and the space of the room and the space beyond the room. One continuous field. The Randall-Sundrum model says, the space you are sensing is a 4-dimensional brain embedded in a 5-dimensional bulk that extends beyond every direction you can perceive. The Upanishad says, the space within the heart is that bulk, not contained by the body arising within it. Rest in that. Let the breath return naturally. Gently return. In 1999, Lisa Randall and Raman-Sundrum published a paper describing our universe as a membrane floating in a 5-dimensional space. Gravity was leaking. The hierarchy problem dissolved. The mathematics worked. The Chandogya Upanishad had described the same geometry. Ibn Arabi had described the same levels. The Hermetic tradition had described the same planes. Lao Tzu had described the same source. The Buddhist tradition had described the same lokas. The pyramid texts had described the same duat. 6 traditions. 6 independent investigations. 1 geometry. CERN is now searching for direct physical evidence in particle collision data. What it is looking for: 6 ancient traditions already described. From the inside. Ancient wisdom, quantum proof, direct knowing. This is quantum gnosis.